Hello guys, I'm Michelle. I'm a licensed massage therapist in Washington. I bring you MBLEx study resources here on YouTube and on my website. On my website, in the link in the description below and in the pinned comments, you're going to find a huge list of all the study resources for the Massage and Bodywork licensing exam that I have created for you. There's ebooks, study guides, a practice test, there's courses, a lot of stuff for free, and then I have a few things that are paid that will really dial in your calm and confidence when it comes to passing this exam. Right now I'm working on a big course, and that's the anatomy and physiology one. I just closed out teaching you all about the basics of the nervous system for that course. And now today we're going to be talking about the nerves that come out of the cranium and also the spinal nerves. We're going to be talking about those two, and we're going to be talking about the four very important nerve plexuses that you need to know for the MBLEx, and they're very important to know as a body worker massage therapist. So in this video, we're going to be talking about nerve anatomy. I'm going to go ahead and open this up here. There we go. Okay, we're going to be talking about nerve anatomy, divergence and convergence, and autonomic and somatic divisions briefly as a basis to help you to understand how the anatomy of the way that the nerves diverge and converge, how that works, so that you understand what you're looking at. And then we'll go into specific cranial nerves, spinal nerves. We're going to talk about those nerve plexuses that you need to know, and then briefly about dermatomes. I'll talk about that again. Be sure to check out the nervous system pathologies video that I have here on YouTube, but it's also part of a series that I have, a whole course that's available on my website or in the link that I talked about there. You'll find everything that you need to know about specifically how to deal with pathologies that are involved in those four nerve plexuses that I was talking about. So that is very important information for you. Then we're going to do a handful of MBLEx practice questions at the end to help us dial in the information. Okay, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And just so you know, the software that I'm going to be using for this show, for this webinar, is called Complete Anatomy. It's by Elsevier, and it's pretty great. I really enjoy it. So I'll be diving into that to give you guys a little bit more of a 3D view of what the nerves look like. So quick nervous system overview. Information highway, one big word. Okay, anyway, nervous system is composed of the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord and the meninges, right, the pink part. And then the peripheral nervous system is all the yellow streaks coming off, diverging off of each transverse aspect of the spinal cord. And it's the whole system processes information, sensory information, and it makes things happen in your body to help you to stay alive. So information goes up, it's ascending, it's an affector, and motor commands come down, they're descending, and they're effectors. All right, and then here's a quick little view of the nerve anatomy. In the first video on the nervous system, I talk about all of this stuff, but just so you know, you got a big bundle of nerves that are going to be coming out between those vertebrae. So you got a big bundle of nerves. It's got all of these different tracks in it. It's got sensory tracks, it's got motor tracks, and it also will have the divisions for autonomic and somatic, or autonomic and sympathetic. We've got some that are some fascicles inside of this nerve bundle that are for specific areas, specific glands, specific muscles, for the enteric nervous system, and also for the somatic nervous system for making like muscles move. All right, so there's just like one bundle can have a lot of stuff, and it will split off as necessary. And in a lot of these nerve bundles, it can be one axon. That's an axon right there, the tiniest unit of a nerve. It can be one axon that goes all the way from the brain all the way down to the tip of your finger, which is pretty cool. It's just one long cell. That's pretty neat. But a lot of the time there are synapses in between that split things up. Ganglia are the bundles that hold it all together. We're going to talk about that. Okay, so neuronal pathways, real quick. In the last video, I explained all this. It's where, like say in divergence, it splits. So let's say in the central nervous system, a decision is made and the impulse goes down the chain, but it splits into multiple places. Typically, there'll be like a ganglia where the split happens, and then convergence, which is typically where the sensory information on the outskirts is all coming together into the central nervous system. That's typical. And these can happen overlapping in the same plexus. So we're going to talk about that, okay? All right, so one nerve, multiple uses. Ooh, I love that animation. That looks good, right? So we can have, as I said, one bundle can have multiple things happening inside of it, and it goes to a bunch of different parts of our bodies. You can read all of that later if you want to. So let's see, well, maybe I'll look over it. Both types can travel together in the same nerve trunk and then branch off to their specific targets. Somatic fibers to skeletal muscles and autonomic fibers to smooth muscles. That's for the motor part. And then for the sensory part, they all come together into a bundle from one physical region. And then in the somatic nervous system, we've got the motor units where like a somatic neuron will come down from the spinal cord in the bundle and it'll split off. I talk about all of this in Unit 12, which is all about muscle contractions. So go ahead and check that out so you can get in more detail about it. But just telling you that there's all these different forks that happen that split off from the central nervous system, from the spinal cord. All these forks will come off once the nerve root has split. So we've got the sympathetic division, we've got the parasympathetic division, and they split off in their own ways. So these are the ganglia. We're going to get a look at that. Yeah, so that gives you an idea. Just real quick, this fuse box that is the sympathetic innervation bundle, this like ganglial chain here, it only comes off of the thoracic nerves, the thoracic through L1 nerves. So it's mostly, they call it thoracolumbar, but it's mostly like the thoracic where your ribs are, where the sympathetic innervation is coming out. Whereas the parasympathetic innervation happens on the periphery of that in the sacral plexi and in the cervical, and actually it's all cranial, in the cranial nerves. So sympathetic stuff comes out of the cranial nerves and the sacral bundle, okay? All right, that blank screen was to remind me that I wanted to get onto my anatomy complete. That's what it looks like. And now through the magic of editing, I'm just gonna skip to the actual nervous system. Okay, here we are. Look at my person. Looks like it's a female. And if we come in, we can see how there are these, it looks like a huge web, but everything is coming out of these gaps, where the nerve comes out of the gaps in between the vertebrae. So we have that, all right? And then I wanted to give you a look at the cranial nerves, where they come out, because that's where we're gonna look next, is at these cranial nerves. They come out of this gap. They come directly out of the brainstem instead of coming out of the spinal cord. There's this little gap right above C1 where they come out. And I just wanted to give you guys a look at that real quick. But let's also look at the ganglia of the sympathetic system and check that out. Boom, 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 right inside the ribs. Come on, come out, come out, come out. So that thoracic ganglial chain where the sympathetic cascade comes out is right inside the rib cage. So there you go. Now you know what that looks like. Okay, So we are going to dive deeper into the specific plexes in a second, but I just wanted to give you guys just real quick, sacral. There's all the sacral stuff, and in the front there's the lumbar plexus. Pretty cool. We'll come back to this. Let's go back to the slideshow. Okay. So 12 cranial nerves, and I showed you where they come out. They emerge directly out of the brain via the gap directly above C1. There's a mnemonic for the 12 pairs of sensory nerve or cranial nerves, and those are O, to touch and feel, very green. Vegetables, that's AH, accessory hypoglossal. You don't have to memorize all of these. I'm going to give you a list of the ones that you're going to want to know something about. In my opinion, as massage therapists, cranial nerve 10 is the most important to remember. Okay, so there's that for the parasympathetic response to the organs. But let's talk about all the other ones. You can come back to that list. So that's what it looks like coming out of the brain stem. Where was I? Okay. So I keep forgetting I can't zoom in on this. So there's where the cranial nerves come out of the brain stem right there. And then they look like that from an inferior view. There's a list of how they all come out. You can come back to this slideshow if you need to know more. So important cranial nerve stuff to remember. This is what's most important for you guys to remember, because you don't have to memorize everything. You need to know what the special sensory nerves are. Olfactory nerve 1, optic nerve 2. Olfactory is smell, optic is vision. Vestibulocochlear is for hearing and balance, and glossopharyngeal is for tasting and swallowing and smelling. Okay, so these are the very, very, very special ones to remember. The order that the cranial nerves are listed in are not their order of importance. That's just how they numbered them. So remember that. So vagus nerve is where the sympathetic stuff happens. And then the trigeminal nerve, that's nerve 4 and fascial nerve 7. You're probably not going to be asked to remember the specific numbers for those guys, but what's important for them is that they innervate facial muscles, because we work with muscles. So they innervate those facial muscles, and they're also sensory nerves for people that have neuropathy, especially after a stroke or any other kind of neuropathic conditions. When they're in prone position, they can be sensitive to that because their face is down in the face cradle. You get it? And so if they have sensory issues with that, then that's something important to remember. So trigeminal nerve and facial nerve, vagus nerve, and then the special sensory nerves. All right, so that's it for the cranial nerves. Now we're going to move on to talking about those spinal nerves. And so they split into the dorsal and ventral. We talked about that in previous videos. Dorsal being where the sensory information goes up, ascends. That's on the back part of your spinal cord, the posterior part. So you imagine your butt side, right? That's where the information is going up. The tracts are going up the nervous system. And then on the ventral side, which is anterior, is where the information is descending and going down into the rest of your body. Now, this is interesting that we have the numbers of vertebrae that we have do not correlate with how many pairs of these nerves that we have. We have 8 pairs of cervical nerves starting at the top of C1 and ending below C7. So there are 8 pairs of those. Then we have 12 thoracic pairs, which does correlate with the vertebrae. So they start directly inferior to the vertebrae. And then we have 5 lumbar, and we do have 5 lumbar vertebrae starting below, 5 pairs of sacral, and 1 pair of coccygeal. Coccygeal. All right. Okay, so what they do, they connect the spinal cord to specific body regions. They carry sensory and motor fibers, and most of them are mixed nerves. They have both sensory and motor, and they're involved in the reflex arcs that happen in our spinal cord, and then somatic control, which is our muscle contractions. Okay, so now we're going to talk about those nerve plexes. So first one that we need to know is the cervical plexus, which is a bundle of nerves that come out of C1 through C4. Phrenic nerve is the most important one. I actually had a test question about the phrenic nerve innervating the diaphragm. So that's the cervical nerve that stretches the farthest because it goes all the way down. It innervates the pericardium, a bunch of stuff inside of that central cavity, that thoracic cavity. Okay, so phrenic nerve looks like that. Squiggles all the way down from the neck down into the thoracic cavity, and then that's the whole cervical plexus. Let's get a look at it. Okay, so here's what it looks like coming out of C1 through C4. So you can see where it splits off. There's going to be a dorsal and ventral root that comes out. I don't know why it's not showing, but I don't care. Anyway, so you can see where it spreads. That cervical plexus goes up the back of the head, goes around and innervates the throat, and it goes down around the tops of the shoulders. So it innervates the musculature in that area. Okay, next one you need to know. This is super important for us as massage therapists working on people's pain and discomfort that people have in their arms and in their hands. It's the brachial plexus, and it goes from C5 to T1. So down in this lower area. So it starts out, I always forget I can't zoom in. Look at this, this is really interesting. So yeah, it starts out in the cervical, the lower cervical area. It goes down under the clavicle, and it wraps into the armpit, down the ribs, down the arms, all the way down to your hands. It innervates your fingers even. And this is an interesting diagram of how those bundles come out. And this is the clavicle, I think. Let's see. Yeah, this is supposed to be the structure is supposed to be the clavicle, but it gives you an idea of how each of these branches will come together and split apart, and they share information with each other. Isn't that interesting? Converging and diverging motor and sensory information in this plexus. So this is really important to us. I go over all of that in the pathologies video because our musculature in this area can impinge on that plexus, squeeze it down, and cause issues going down our arms and into our hands. So let's see. Real quick, I just want to show you what that looks like on my software. Okay, so here's your brachial plexus here. Gonna zoom in. That's where I got that image that's in the slide. As you can see, those nerves go right under that collarbone, and we'll have our scalene muscles here. We're gonna have our pec muscles here, subclavius in there, and that's where that constriction happens that impinges the nerves that are going to be going down your arms. And then down here, we have the nerves go down into your wrist, right under that palmar aponeurosis. It goes around the back of your hand as well. Okay, so those are just the main nerves. We're going to talk about those main nerves here. So the main nerves that you need to know, this is super important for the MBLEx, is to know all of these different nerves that go down into your hands, down into your arms and hands, okay? So we have the axillary nerve. Here's the innervation, so it gives you an idea of where it spreads. It's all over the top of the arm. And this is the dorsal side, so it's the back, so it innervates some of those rotator cuff muscles and your deltoid. The musculocutaneous innervation happens in your forearm area. So there's like the sensory stuff and also elbow flexion and elbow flexion and yeah, the biceps. So basically bending your arm happens because of that. And then we have the radial nerve that's going to be going down. See all that red right there? That's all radial nerve. So it innervates your elbow and then all the way down to the radial side of your hand on the posterior part of your hand, which is not the fingertips, but the main parts of it. And then the medial nerve, the median nerve, innervates your palm, and it innervates your thumb, your middle finger, and your pointer finger. And so when that median nerve gets constricted, because it goes right through that carpal tunnel, it could get constricted. One of the telltale signs is tingling in the radial side of your hand. And then finally we have the ulnar nerve, which is going to be the ulnar side of your hand. So that's your little bit of your ring finger and also your pinky finger is the ulnar restriction. And so there's a pathway that wraps around for each of these. And so I suggest that you go ahead and check those out. Yeah. So those are the nerves that you'll need to know for the MBLEx regarding your arms. And we're going to move on to the lumbar plexus, which has its roots going from T12 to L5. And typically the muscles or the nerves wrap around the front of your pelvis. And then you have the obturator nerve that goes down, or actually it goes under and through the obturator and goes around to the anterior part of your legs. So it innervates the anterior part of the pelvic girdle. The femoral nerve is on the anterior part. We're going to look at all that in a second. But once again, look at the divergence and convergence of the sensory and motor neurons and how they all share information with each other. That's why they call it a plexus. Okay, so I don't have on this software, it doesn't have a list of how, it doesn't have a list of the lumbar plexus, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what it looks like. It's a network that comes out of these lower lumbar vertebrae or the middle lumbar vertebrae. There's the obturator nerve going down inside of the pelvic bowl, and it's going to end up coming out of that obturator foramen, and it's going to come around to the anterior part of the femur. And this is the femoral nerve going down through that area of caution that we have right here in the femoral triangle, and then it goes down the anterior part of the leg. And real quick, I'm just going to add some layers so you can see what it looks like when it's all of these nerves. This is the sciatic nerve right here, so just ignore that. But see, the obturator nerve goes through there. We've got the femoral nerve that comes through over the anterior part of the pelvic bowl. So yeah, they all come down and innervate the anterior parts of our thighs. And then the last sacral plexus, which is a very, very important one for massage therapists and body workers as well, because we often get impingement, is the sacral plexus, which is the home of the sciatic nerve. There's a sciatic nerve coming from the low back, and it's going under the piriformis in this image, and in this one it's all lit up because it's inflamed. It's a stock image that I found. But yeah, it gives you an idea of how that works going under that piriformis muscle. And I go further into that in the pathologies video for nervous pathologies. But yeah, the sacral plexus goes from L4 to S4, sacral 4, and it innervates, in it are the gluteal nerves, the fibular, and the tibial nerves. So it goes all the backside of the pelvis, down the backs of your legs, and even around the front and the lateral parts of your legs. So there's an idea of what that looks like, but let's go ahead and check that out on the software. Okay, so once again, the software doesn't have the sacral plexus, but here's where the sciatic nerve comes out and goes around in between. It goes around the acetabular joint and goes down the backs of the legs And looks like, does it show all those details? It just shows around the knee joint. But that's the sciatic nerve and how it gets impinged in this area. And it comes out of that lumbar area. Let's zoom in. You see how that nerve bundle goes down into that sciatic nerve canal, and then it splits out from underneath. So that's how that nerve bundle happens inside of that sacral area. So it comes out that way. All right, that's pretty cool. And then I can add more of that sacral plexus here. And those are all the nerves that are involved in the sacral plexus. So very important stuff for you guys to know. So remember those plexuses. I'm gonna go ahead and close that out. Okay, anything else? Dermatomes. Okay, that's the final thing. We talked about this in the integumentary system. Video 8 has sensory receptors and dermatomes, but just real quick, sensory receptors from specific regions of the body follow the nerve pathways, just like I said, converging and diverging all the way up to where they go into the spinal column. Now, numbness or loss of sensation in a specific area of the body can indicate a nerve impingement with the associated vertebral disc or nerve that goes along with that area. So if you have a specific area that you know is innervated by a specific nerve that goes to a specific root at that vertebrae, at that spinal vertebrae, then you can guess what muscles might be squeezing that vertebrae, and you can work on that. So here's a little list of how the dermatomes work, and also just knowing your dermatomes will give you an idea of what region those nerves go to in your spinal column, so that you can work on the muscles around those areas. So we know C2 to C8 innervates the head, neck, shoulders, arms for the sensory parts. And then T1 through T12 innervates the chest, the abdomen, the thoracic back, the anterior arms. And then when we get down into the lumbar, L1 through L5, it innervates the low back, hips, and the front, the anterior parts of the legs. And then sciatic, S through 5, innervates the booty and the genitals, and then down those posterior parts of the legs, and even a little bit into, so it's the lateral parts and a tiny, tiny bit into the anterior parts of the low legs. Okay, so that's what you need to know. That's the stuff you need to know. That's the most important stuff, really. I think that's the most important stuff to know for the nervous system in general, but the basics are really important just in case you get some odd questions about it. So let's go ahead and do some MBLEx-style questions about this information. So which nerve innervates the diaphragm? Here are your choices. A, vagus nerve. That's an important one. B, phrenic nerve. C, axillary nerve. Or D, intercostal nerve. Now, intercostal nerve is not one that I talked about, so I just get rid of that one. Axillary nerve, I know, is in the armpit, and it goes down the arm. It is not doesn't have anything to do with the diaphragm. Now, the vagus nerve and the phrenic nerve are both nerves that go into our chest cavity, into our thoracic cavity, but the vagus nerve is all about the parasympathetic responses, and the phrenic nerve is specific to the pericardium and the diaphragm. So I'm going with B, the phrenic nerve, which is, what number? Does it say? No, doesn't matter. So the phrenic nerve arises from spinal roots C3 through C5 and provides the primary motor control of the diaphragm, the main muscle of breathing. It also carries sensory fibers from the diaphragm and nearby membranes. Injury to this nerve can cause difficulty breathing or diaphragmatic paralysis on one side. So that's something to pay attention to. Next question. A client reports tingling in the thumb, index, and middle fingers. Ooh, remember we talked about that? Which nerve is most likely compressed? Now remember what we talked about the nerve that goes through that carpal tunnel area. Okay, so we have A, radial nerve. We We have B, median nerve. We have C, ulnar nerve, and we have D, axillary. So let's step back just a little bit. We know that the radius and the ulna are bones in our arm, in our lower arm. So the ulnus is on the pinky side. So if we have a nerve that's going by the ulna, it would not be the thumb, index, and middle fingers. It would most likely be closer to the radial nerve, which would be on the radius side. And then the median nerve, I know, goes through the middle of the palm. That's median is middle, means middle. So I say the median nerve goes into the middle of the palm. And then the difference between the radial and medial nerve is the radial nerve does not innervate the palm at all. The median nerve does. And it also innervates the thumb, index, and middle finger. So I'm going with B, the median nerve. Okay, the median nerve passes through the carpal tunnel and supplies sensation to the thumb side of the palm and the first 3 fingers. Compression here leads to carpal tunnel syndrome, causing tingling, numbness, or weakness. It also affects thumb opposition and grip strength. So those are some symptoms you need to look for when you're working with your clients. Which nerve supplies the biceps brachii and allows elbow flexion? Nerve supplies the biceps brachii and allows elbow flexion. Axillary nerve is A, B, musculocutaneous nerve, C, ulnar nerve, and D, radial nerve. And axillary nerve goes to the armpit, so that's not about the biceps, which is more on the anterior part of the arm, anterior lateral. And then musculocutaneous, this is how I remember musculocutaneous, cutaneous referring to the skin, so it senses things on the skin, but it also innervates muscles. And I remember that because it innervates the elbow flexion part. It innervates the muscles of elbow flexion. That's part of the question. Okay, so I know that that's B. And then the ulnar and radial nerve are important for innervation and sensation for the lower parts of the arms, the forearms, and in the ulnar's case, the pinky and ring fingers. So explanation, the musculocutaneous nerve innervates the biceps brachii, the brachialis, and the coracobrachialis, which flex the elbow and assist in forearm supination. It originates from C5 to C7 spinal roots, and the brachial plexus sensory branches also supply the lateral forearm, which may show numbness if the nerve is injured. Okay, I think this is the last question. Which cranial nerve is primarily responsible for regulating heart rate and digestion? Okay, regulating heart rate and digestion. So we have the trigeminal nerve, the facial nerve, the vagus nerve, and the hypoglossal nerve. So I know that the trigeminal nerve and the facial nerve are all about innervating the face. So sensory and motor are in those 2 nerves. Vagus nerve is about the parasympathetic response. I'll always remember that. Hypoglossal nerve, I can't remember what that does. Pardon me while I go back. Oh wait, I went too far. Sorry guys. Hypoglossal, tongue movement, not sensation, but tongue movement. Okay, so go back. All right, so tongue movement, facial stuff, vagus nerve is about parasympathetic response, which means it is trying to find homeostasis with our digestion and our heart rate. So I would go with C, vagus nerve. That makes the most sense. So the vagus nerve is a mixed cranial nerve that extends beyond the head and neck to innervate the heart, the lungs, and the digestive organs. It carries parasympathetic, that is autonomic fibers that slow the heart rate and stimulate digestive activity. Because of its broad influence, it's often called the body's main rest and digest nerve. Okay, so that's all we have for today regarding that. I feel like is some of the most important information for the nervous system. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing. I love your comments. I love that you guys like my videos. It makes it way easier for future massage therapists to have access to this information so that they can know what they're doing. And in the next video, in the next set of videos, we're going to be integrating neurological things, that nervous system stuff that we learned with the skeletal muscle system. And it's a really cool coming together of everything that we've been studying for the last 3 weeks. And I will see you over there in the next set of videos. And thank you. Toodaloo.